My name is Jonas Staal. I am the founder of the New World Summit, where we are here today, the second edition. It is my pleasure to welcome you here. Most of you will know by now that we are, as the New World Summit, an artistic as well as a political organization. We are engaged with creating what we call alternative parliaments. Alternative parliaments that we offer to organizations that today are excluded from democracy. The space where we are sitting here today, not its enormous cover, but this wooden lectures that we are all standing behind today, is what we propose, is what we regard as a proposition for such an alternative parliament, developed together with architect Paul Kuipers, who is present here with us today. We follow the conviction that in order to imagine a different politics, we need to imagine a different space for it to manifest itself. And that is why we have taken the effort of creating this very space where we are sitting in today. Art. Art is the political tool with which we bring that principle into being. Our main focus so far as the New World Summit has been on the way that so-called designated lists of terrorist organizations are used as instruments to exclude certain political organizations from democratic processes. These terrorist lists include organizations that are internationally considered to be states' threats, and thus a threat to the stability of democracy as such. They are organizations that are spread across the widest ideological spectrum imaginable, sometimes fighting each other even more than the governments that have listed them. In the European Union, a secret committee called the Clearing House draws up this terrorist list. The Clearing House meets biannually in secret, and there are no public proceedings of the way decisions are made for the listing of these political organizations. One could rightfully say that by its own standards, the committee that is in charge of placing organizations outside of democracy is itself organized in a fundamentally undemocratic manner. The consequences of being listed are severe. Immediate freezing of bank accounts, an international travel ban guarantee the isolation from the political sphere. We, as the New World Summit, we attempt to explore the juridical gray zones of our system that allow to circumvent these laws. Or at least we attempt to use all tools at our disposal to expand the outer limits of the political system that we live in today. During our first two-day summit in Berlin on May 4th and 5th this year, we hosted 4 political representatives and 3 juridical representatives, meaning lawyers, of organizations listed as terrorist. We were able to do so for different reasons. One of them is that some of these listed organizations are involved with peace negotiations, and as a result of this, certain members gain a temporarily diplomatic status and have more possibilities of traveling around freely. Another reason is that we make use of the discrepancies between different terrorist lists in different countries, which often do not overlap. Organizations listed as terrorists in Europe might not be listed as terrorists in the United States, and the other way around. So this means that if one would speculatively travel long enough from country to country, one could at the end host all organizations listed worldwide as terrorists today in a completely legal manner, by always inviting them to come to the countries where they are not listed at that very moment. It says something about the relativity of the concept of terrorism. As a result of making use of these types of exceptions, for the first edition of the New World Summit in Berlin, we were able, for example, to listen to Fadil Yildirim, who spent 10 years of her life in jail as a result of her activities in the Kurdish women movement, departing from the feminist theories of Abdullah Öcalan, the founder of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, better known as the PKK. We were able to listen to Musa Ag Asarit on behalf of the National Movement for the Liberation of Azawad, consisting of the Tuareg rebels that at the time of the first summit had just taken over 2/3 of the country of the state of Mali, or at least what we still today consider the state of Mali. We listened, among others, to Louis Yalandoni on behalf of the National Democratic Front of the Philippines, who spoke, among others, about Professor José María Sison, the founder of the Communist Party of the Philippines and its armed wing, the New People's Army, who lives in exile in the Netherlands since the end of the 80s. Louis Yalandoni is present here with us today. Again, welcome, Mr. Yalandoni. This time, we are also able to host Professor Sison as our keynote speaker today, something that was impossible to do in Berlin due to the fact that Professor Sison lives in a juridical limbo that neither allows him to work in the Netherlands nor to make use of any social service or travel outside of the country due to the blacklisting of his organization. In Berlin, we were not able to develop the legal instrument necessary to have Professor Sison participate in the first summit. It is for this reason that this time, instead of inviting him to one of our alternative parliaments abroad, we have literally moved the parliament to him here today. Welcome, Professor Sison. Our second summit is different than the first one, because instead of a variety of different organizations, we present one in-depth lecture of Professor Sison, who will introduce to us the history of his organization, the Communist Party of the Philippines and the New People's Army, his confrontation with the use of the designated lists of terrorist organizations against him and his organization, and the relationship between the political ideals that lay at the foundation of his organizations and the rise of the worldwide protest movements in our world today. The implications of Professor Sison's lecture will then be thoroughly explored with the help of 5 invited respondents from the field of law, politics, and academia. They will provide insights into the different layers, one could say, that separate representatives of organizations from citizens and critically argue against or in favor of the legislation that creates processes of exclusion within our current political system. We move from Professor Sison to the first layer, his lawyer, Jan Vermon, welcome, to the second layer in the form of public prosecutor Alexander van Dam, and then we look there, yes. The third will be former judge and lawyer Willem van Bennekom, the fourth, the leader of the Dutch Pirate Party, Dirk Poot, and the fifth and final layer, professor at the Center of Terrorism and Counterterrorism, Beatrice de Graaf. Each of them will help us to understand, through the specific body of knowledge they represent, the different political, economic, juridical, and ideological interests invested in the concept of the so-called terrorist. They will help us to gain insights in the reason why the Netherlands was willing to list the Communist Party of the Philippines and the New People's Army, even though they have never caused a concrete threat for the Dutch state. What is the reason to exclude and suppress this political narrative that these organizations propose? I also take the occasion of welcoming all of the respondents as well. Specifically, Ms. de Graaf, you have helped us a lot in organizing this summit, and we are very grateful for your advice. Further, Mr. Vermont, Van Dam, Bennekom, and Poot, we are very honored that you were willing to be present here with us today. Some of you as critics, and some of you as supporters of anti-terrorist legislation. Today we are present in the alternative parliament of the second New World Summit. Some weeks ago, we have finished the building of our third parliament in Kochi in India that will be put into use in March 2013. And we are preparing the fourth New World Summit in the Royal Theatre of Brussels in 2014, near to the European Parliament, where the designated lists of terrorist organizations are drafted. I will end my introduction by telling you shortly what it is that we want and what it is that we stand for. As the New World Summit, we oppose the use of the concept of terrorism, certainly when it's not applied equally to the politics of nation-states. I belong to the generation that has come to political consciousness in the wake of the attacks of September 11, 2001, in the wake also of the consequential assaults on Afghanistan and Iraq, and my country, the Netherlands, supported these assaults politically. Millions of people worldwide walked the streets to oppose their government's participation in the so-called war against terror. They showed that there was no people's mandate for this war to be waged, that this false war was sold to us through deception and by the help of the so-called state of emergency, allowing to temporarily put democracy on hold so that civil liberties would not stand in the way of defending democracy against its so-called enemies. It is exactly as a result of this reasoning, the so-called claim that we have to defend democracy through anti-democratic measures, that the promise of this word, democracy, disappeared in the dark architecture of extraterritorial prisons in Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo Bay. At the basis lies an American dream that has turned into a worldwide juridical nightmare, to which we continue to condemn our very own citizens. In 2007, the Iraqi Dutch Wessam al-Dalema that was tortured, and Dutch citizen Sabir K. only 1.5 weeks ago is going to be sent, or is probably going to be sent to the US. In the face of this so-called democratic dream turned nightmare, the New World Summit wants to contribute to an understanding and practice of democracy that is non-statist, that represents no territory to possess, to colonize, or to occupy. We believe that democracy is limitless by definition, that democracy is not defined through property, but through moments in which radically different voices and political positions are capable of exploring a shared space. When existing monopolies of power are disrupted, interrogated, and broken down, democratic moments, a democratic potential comes into existence. And it's at these moments, these events, that the promise of a power that belongs to the people as a whole becomes manifest. This promise is what we refer to and defend as a fundamental democracy. And we believe that it's the task of both progressive politics and art to act upon this promise of a fundamental democracy time and again. Last but not least, there are some people that I want to thank that helped to realize the summit here today. First, the New World Summit, the second New World Summit here in Leiden, was realized in collaboration with musical theater ensemble De Veenfabriek and Museum de Lakenhal and their collaborative initiative Utopisch Nest, who, about a year ago, asked me the question whether we can still believe in society. And today, I present them my answer. I thank you, Paul Koek, Paul Slange, Meta Knol, Nicole Roepers, Anton Spruit, and very especially Rezi van der Ploeg, who has been structurally present in developing the summit with us today. I also thank my team, producer Jonas Bouadi, editor Vincent van Gerven-Oei, curator Robert Kluiver, the assistant producer René Indermauer, architect Paul Kuipers, Remco van Bladel, Sjoerd Oudman, and Casper Oostergetel, the last being the head of development and production, working late hours to have the space present as we have it here today. And I thank you very much, our audience, for you being present here with us today as well. It's my pleasure to give the word to a philosopher and a friend who I deeply admire, Vincent W. van Gerven-Oei, who will be your chairman of the day.